The day started like any other at the bustling international airport. Travelers from all walks of life hurried through security checks, dragging their suitcases behind them or clutching carry-on bags stuffed with essentials for their journeys. Among these travelers was Sarah, a confident and stylish woman in her early 30s. With her neatly pressed blazer, sleek ponytail, and a tote bag slung over her shoulder, she exuded professionalism. She had been traveling for work all week, attending meetings and conferences, and now she was finally heading home to unwind. Sarah's flight was scheduled to depart in just under an hour, and she couldn't wait to settle into her seat. After waiting in line to board, she stepped onto the plane with relief. Her ticket confirmed she had a window seat near the front of the aircraft, a small perk after days of back-to-back appointments. As she made her way down the narrow aisle, dodging elbows and apologizing politely when someone needed more space to stow their luggage, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. Finally, she reached her row, slid her bag into the overhead compartment, and sank into her seat by the window. It wasn't long before the cabin began filling up with passengers. Families with young children shuffled past, juggling diaper bags and toys. Business people tapped away on laptops while waiting for takeoff, and solo travelers flipped through magazines or scrolled on their phones. Everything seemed normal, until Mark appeared. Mark was a tall man in his mid-40s, wearing a casual polo shirt and jeans. He walked briskly down the aisle, followed by his wife and 2 kids, a boy around 8 years old and a toddler clutching a stuffed bunny. They were clearly eager to get settled, but something about Mark's demeanor set him apart from the other passengers. His jaw was clenched, and he scanned each row with a look of growing impatience. When he arrived at Sarah's row, his expression shifted from annoyance to frustration. "This is our seat," Mark said abruptly, pointing at the empty middle seat next to Sarah. His voice carried an edge that caught the attention of nearby passengers. Sarah glanced up from adjusting her headphones, surprised by his tone. "I'm sorry?" she replied calmly, though she already knew what was coming. "You're sitting in my kid's seat," Mark continued, his voice rising slightly. "We booked these seats together as a family, so I need you to move." Sarah blinked, taken aback by the accusation. She pulled out her boarding pass and held it up. "Actually, this is my assigned seat," she explained, keeping her tone polite. "I double-checked when I boarded. I'm not sure why there's confusion, but I'm where I'm supposed to be." For a moment, Mark looked unsure, glancing between Sarah's ticket and his own. But instead of backing down, his irritation only grew. "Well, this isn't working," he snapped. "My child can't sit here if you're taking up the whole row. You'll have to move somewhere else." By now, several heads had turned to watch the exchange. Some passengers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it. Others pretended not to notice, burying themselves in books or pretending to sleep. Sarah, however, remained composed. She didn't raise her voice or show anger, even though she could feel the weight of judgmental stares pressing down on her. "Sir, I understand your concern," she said evenly, "but I've done nothing wrong. My ticket says I belong here, and I intend to stay unless the airline tells me otherwise." Mark scoffed, shaking his head. "Of course you'd say that," he muttered under his breath, though it was loud enough for Sarah and those seated nearby to hear. The comment hung in the air like a dark cloud, heavy with implications. Was he really implying what everyone thought he was? Sarah tightened her grip on her armrest, refusing to let his words rattle her. As the argument continued, tension filled the cabin. Mark's wife tugged gently at his sleeve, whispering something about letting it go, but he brushed her off. The children stood awkwardly beside him, looking confused and uncomfortable. One of the flight attendants passing through the aisle paused briefly to assess the situation, then moved on, likely deciding to give them a moment to resolve things themselves. But the standoff showed no signs of ending. Mark's demands became increasingly aggressive, his volume rising with each sentence. Passengers who had initially tried to ignore the scene found themselves drawn in, unable to look away. Some whispered quietly among themselves, speculating about how the situation would unfold. Others simply watched, hoping someone, anyone, would step in to diffuse the tension before it escalated further. And then, just as the confrontation seemed to reach its peak, a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Is everything okay here?" It was Lisa, one of the senior flight attendants, approaching with a calm yet commanding presence. Everyone turned to see how she would handle the brewing storm. Little did they know her response would leave a lasting impression on everyone aboard the flight, including Sarah and Mark. Lisa's voice carried a tone of authority, but it was also warm and measured, cutting through the tension like a knife. Passengers who had been watching the escalating argument between Sarah and Mark turned their attention to her as she approached. Her crisp uniform and confident posture immediately commanded respect. She stood in the aisle, hands clasped in front of her, her eyes scanning the scene with practiced calmness. "Is there an issue here?" Lisa asked again, addressing both Sarah and Mark. Her question hung in the air for a moment, breaking the charged silence that had settled over the cabin. Mark wasted no time responding, stepping forward slightly as if eager to explain his side of the story. "Yes, there is," he said, his voice still tinged with frustration. "This woman is sitting in my child's seat. We booked these seats, together as a family, and now she refuses to move." He gestured toward the empty middle seat next to Sarah, then pointed at his son, who stood quietly beside him, clutching a small backpack. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but Lisa raised, a hand gently signaling for patience. "Let me take a look at your tickets, please," she said evenly, her gaze shifting between Mark and Sarah. Both passengers handed over their boarding passes without hesitation. Lisa studied them carefully, comparing seat assignments and cross-referencing them with the flight manifest on her tablet. After a few moments, she nodded thoughtfully. "I see," Lisa said, turning first to Sarah. "Ma'am, this is indeed your assigned seat. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." Then, addressing Mark, she added, "Sir, I understand your concern about keeping your family together, but unfortunately this seat belongs to another passenger. Your child will need to sit elsewhere." Mark's face flushed red and his jaw tightened. He wasn't ready to let the matter drop. "That doesn't make sense," he insisted, his voice rising slightly. "How can they assign us seats that split up our family? It's not fair to ask my kid to sit alone." Lisa remained unfazed, her expression calm but firm. "I completely understand how frustrating that must feel," she replied. "However, all passengers are seated based on their reservations. If there's an open seat available once we're airborne, I'd be happy to assist you in relocating your child. But until then, we have to honor the seating arrangements as they are." Mark shook his head, clearly displeased with her response. "So what am I supposed to do? Just leave my kid stranded while she sits comfortably?" He gestured toward Sarah, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The implication behind his words wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Sarah herself. She sat silently, her fingers gripping the armrests of her seat, trying to maintain her composure despite the thinly veiled hostility directed at her. Lisa's demeanor shifted ever so slightly, her professional mask hardening into something more resolute. She took a step closer to Mark, lowering her voice just enough to ensure the conversation stayed focused but loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Sir, I want to remind you that every passenger has the right to their assigned seat regardless of circumstances. This isn't about convenience, it's about fairness." Mark blinked, caught off guard by her directness. Before he could respond, Lisa continued, her voice steady, but carrying an unmistakable edge. "If you'd like, I can check for alternative seating options after takeoff. Until then, I'll need everyone to remain calm and respectful. Arguing won't solve anything, and it disrupts the experience for other passengers." The weight of Lisa's words seemed to settle over the cabin. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Passengers exchanged glances, some nodding approvingly at Lisa's handling of the situation, while others looked uncomfortable at witnessing such a public confrontation. Mark hesitated, clearly torn between pressing his point further or backing down. His wife placed a gentle hand on his arm, whispering something softly. Whatever she said appeared to deflate some of his anger, though his scowl remained firmly in place. Reluctantly, Mark stepped back, allowing his family to take their remaining seats. His son slid into the aisle seat next to Sarah, while his wife and toddler squeezed into the row directly behind them. Though the immediate crisis seemed resolved, the tension lingered. Mark avoided making eye contact with anyone, instead focusing on adjusting his seatbelt and muttering under his breath. His wife, on the other hand, offered Sarah a small, apologetic smile before settling into her own seat. Meanwhile, Sarah exhaled slowly, releasing the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She glanced at Lisa, who gave her a reassuring nod before moving on to assist other passengers. Despite the resolution, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest. Mark's comments and the underlying tone of entitlement had struck a nerve. Still, she reminded herself to stay composed. There was nothing to gain from letting his behavior get the better of her. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the atmosphere in the cabin gradually shifted. Conversations resumed, albeit quieter than before, as people tried to put the incident behind them. Flight attendants bustled about, ensuring everyone was buckled in and ready for departure. Outside, the engines roared to life, drowning out the last remnants of tension. But for Sarah, the encounter left a lasting impression. She stared out the window, watching the ground grow smaller as the plane ascended into the sky. Her mind replayed the events, analyzing every word and gesture. While part of her wanted to dismiss the incident as a minor inconvenience, another part recognized its significance. Moments like this weren't rare. They happened far too often, especially to women like her, and yet today felt different. Today someone had stood up for her. Lisa's intervention hadn't just diffused the situation, it had sent a powerful message. By refusing to tolerate Mark's demands and calling out his behavior, she had shown Sarah, and everyone else on the plane, that standing up against injustice mattered. Even in small, everyday interactions, courage could make a difference. As the flight leveled off and the seatbelt sign switched off, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. She didn't know what the rest of the journey held, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't forget this day anytime soon. As the plane soared above the clouds, the initial tension began to fade, though it still lingered in subtle ways. Passengers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation were now quietly piecing together their thoughts about what they'd seen. Some glanced at Sarah with expressions of sympathy or admiration for how calmly she had handled herself. Others stole furtive looks at Mark, who sat stiffly in his seat staring straight ahead, clearly avoiding eye contact with anyone around him. Lisa, the flight attendant who had intervened, continued her duties throughout the cabin with the same professionalism that had earned her respect moments ago. She moved gracefully down the aisle, offering beverages and snacks to passengers, ensuring everyone felt comfortable despite the rocky start. But even as she worked, her presence seemed to carry a quiet authority, a reminder that fairness and decorum would be upheld on this flight. Eventually, Lisa returned to Sarah's row. She paused briefly, leaning down to speak softly to Sarah. "Are you doing okay?" she asked, her voice warm and genuine. There was no hint of judgment or pity. In her tone, just pure concern. Sarah looked up, surprised but touched by the question. "Yes, thank you," she replied, managing a small smile. "I really appreciate how you handled everything earlier." Lisa nodded, her lips curving into a reassuring grin. "It's my job to make sure everyone feels safe and respected on board," she said simply. Then, after a beat, she added, "If anything else happens or if you just need something, don't hesitate to let me know." The sincerity in Lisa's words struck a chord with Sarah. It wasn't often that someone stepped in so decisively during situations like this, especially when biases and prejudices came into play. For a moment, Sarah felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She realized that Lisa hadn't just been doing her job, she had gone above and beyond, standing firmly against behavior that sought to diminish another person's dignity. Meanwhile, Mark remained silent, stewing in his own frustration. He hadn't said much since Lisa's intervention, but his body language spoke volumes. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, and he occasionally glanced at his phone, scrolling absent-mindedly without actually reading anything. His wife, sitting behind him, leaned forward once or twice to whisper suggestions about relaxing or letting go of the issue, but Mark either ignored her or gave short, clipped responses. Their son, seated next to Sarah, seemed caught in the middle of it.
All.
The boy kept glancing nervously between his father and Sarah, unsure of how to act. At one point, he accidentally bumped Sarah's elbow while reaching for his backpack. Startled, he quickly mumbled an apology, his cheeks flushing red. "It's okay," Sarah assured him kindly, giving him a reassuring smile. "No harm done." The boy hesitated, then offered a shy grin before turning back to his belongings. Sarah couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for him. Children often bore the brunt of adult conflicts, forced to navigate emotions they didn't fully understand. This little boy hadn't asked for any of this. He was simply trying to enjoy the flight like everyone else. As time passed, the atmosphere in the cabin grew lighter. The hum of conversation filled the space, punctuated by laughter from a group of friends traveling together in the back rows. A baby in the front began giggling, eliciting smiles from those nearby. Even the turbulence that jostled the plane midway through the flight failed to dampen spirits. It was met with good-natured groans and jokes about snacks being spilled. Lisa made another round with drinks, pausing longer this time near Sarah's row. As she handed a soda to Mark, she addressed him directly, her tone polite but firm. "Sir, I wanted to check if your family might be interested in moving to some open seats we've found closer to the rear of the plane. We can accommodate your request now if you'd like." Mark hesitated, clearly torn. On one hand, relocating his family would give them more space and potentially ease the awkwardness of sitting near Sarah. On the other hand, accepting the offer might feel like conceding defeat after his earlier outburst. After a long pause, he finally nodded gruffly. "Yeah, fine," he muttered, avoiding Lisa's gaze. "Great," Lisa said brightly, masking her professionalism with a cheerful demeanor. "Let me grab a colleague to assist with the move. It'll only take a minute." True to her word, Lisa returned shortly with another flight attendant, and within moments Mark's family was gathering their belongings and relocating to the new seats. As they shuffled past Sarah, Mark's wife shot her another apologetic look, mouthing a quiet sorry as she passed. Sarah nodded graciously, acknowledging the gesture without holding on to resentment. With the family gone, the row suddenly felt quieter and less tense. Sarah took a deep breath, allowing herself to relax fully for the first time since boarding. She stretched her legs slightly, enjoying the extra room now that the middle seat was empty. For the rest of the flight, she focused on unwinding, reading a book she'd brought along, sipping a cup of tea, and gazing out the window at the endless expanse of sky below. But even as she settled in, Sarah couldn't shake the lingering impact of the earlier confrontation. She replayed Lisa's words in her mind, marveling at how effortlessly the flight attendant had diffused the situation while maintaining her composure. There had been no raised voices, no dramatics, just a calm, steady insistence on treating everyone equally. It was a masterclass in leadership, and Sarah found herself inspired by it. By the time the plane began its descent, the mood in the cabin was almost festive. Passengers chatted animatedly about their plans upon arrival, sharing stories and laughter. Sarah joined in briefly with the woman seated across the aisle, exchanging pleasantries about their travels. When the wheels touched down, bringing the journey to an end, there was a collective sense of relief and excitement among the passengers. As Sarah gathered her things and prepared to disembark, she noticed Lisa walking down the aisle one last time, thanking everyone for flying with the airline. Their eyes met briefly, and Lisa gave her a small, knowing smile. Sarah returned it, feeling a renewed sense of gratitude, not just for Lisa's actions, but for the reminder that standing up for what's right could inspire others to do the same. Stepping off the plane, Sarah knew this experience would stay with her for a long time. It wasn't just about the conflict itself, but about the lessons it carried. The importance of staying composed under pressure, the value of allies who refuse to tolerate injustice, and the power of speaking up, even in small everyday moments. As Sarah stepped off the plane and into the bustling terminal, she couldn't help but reflect on the events of the flight. The confrontation with Mark, Lisa's intervention, and the subtle shifts in the cabin's atmosphere. all of it replayed in her mind like a movie she couldn't pause. She felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her: relief that the tension had eased, gratitude for Lisa's unwavering support, and a lingering frustration over the prejudice she had faced yet again. Walking through the airport, Sarah noticed how life seemed to move at its usual pace around her. Families hurried toward baggage claim, couples embraced after long separations, and travelers queued up at coffee stands for their post-flight caffeine fix. Yet, despite the normalcy surrounding her, Sarah's thoughts were anything but ordinary. She knew this wasn't just another day. This was one of those moments that stayed with you, shaping how you saw the world and your place in it. By the time she reached the baggage carousel, Sarah decided to take a moment to process everything. She found a quiet corner near a large window overlooking the runway and sank onto a bench. Watching planes taxi and take off, she pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. Typing quickly, she began jotting down her thoughts about what had happened. At first it was just fragments, words like bias, respect, and courage, but soon sentences started forming. She wrote about how Mark's behavior had made her feel small, as though her presence was an inconvenience rather than a right. She described Lisa's calm authority and how her words had silenced not only Mark, but also the unspoken biases lurking beneath his demands. And she reflected on the ripple effect of such moments, the way they reminded her and others that standing up against injustice mattered, no matter how small the act might seem. What started as a private reflection soon evolved into something more. Sarah hesitated for a moment before deciding to share her experience online. Social media had become a platform where stories like hers could spark conversations, inspire change, or simply offer solidarity to others who had been in similar situations. After polishing her draft, she posted it under the title, "When Kindness Silenced Prejudice." Within minutes, responses began pouring in. Friends and strangers alike commented on her story, applauding Lisa's professionalism and expressing outrage over Mark's behavior. Some shared their own experiences of facing discrimination while traveling, while others thanked Sarah for speaking out. One comment stood out to her. "Your story reminds us that we're not alone. Thank you for sharing this. It gives me hope." Encouraged by the positive feedback, Sarah scrolled through the replies, feeling a sense of connection she hadn't expected. It was empowering to see her experience resonate with so many people, even if it meant reliving parts of it in the process. But amid the supportive messages, there were also questions. What happened to Mark? Did he apologize? How did Lisa react when the family moved seats? Sarah smiled faintly, realizing she didn't have all the answers. After the family relocated, she hadn't interacted with them again. Mark had kept his head down for the rest of the flight, seemingly avoiding further conflict. His wife, however, had approached Sarah briefly before disembarking. With a nervous glance at her husband, she had whispered, "I'm really sorry about earlier. That wasn't okay." Sarah had accepted the apology graciously, appreciating the effort even if it didn't erase the original offense. Thinking back to that moment now, Sarah realized how complicated human interactions could be. People weren't always entirely good or bad. They were often somewhere in between, shaped by their beliefs, biases, and willingness to grow. Mark's behavior had been hurtful, yes, but his wife's apology suggested there was room for understanding, even if reconciliation wasn't possible. Meanwhile, Lisa had continued to shine throughout the remainder of the flight. After helping Mark's family relocate, she stopped by Sarah's row once more to ensure everything was fine. "Let me know if you need anything else," she said warmly, her smile genuine. Sarah had nodded, too moved to say much more than "thank you." In that brief exchange, Lisa had reinforced what Sarah already suspected. True leadership wasn't about grand gestures. It was about consistency, empathy, and the quiet determination to do what was right, even when it was hard. Back in the terminal, Sarah closed her phone and took a deep breath. The sun was setting outside, casting golden hues across the sky. For the first time since boarding the plane, she felt truly at peace. This experience had tested her patience and resilience, but it had also reminded her of the power of allyship and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. Just then, her phone buzzed with another notification. It was a message from her best friend, Mia, who had seen her post. "OMG, I read your story," Mia wrote. "You handled that so well. And can we talk about Lisa? She's my new hero." Sarah chuckled softly, typing a quick reply. "She's amazing, isn't she? Honestly, I don't think I would have felt as calm without her stepping in." Mia responded almost immediately. "Well, you're amazing too. Sharing your story takes guts. Keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference." Reading those words, Sarah felt a surge of warmth. She knew Mia was right, not because she believed she was extraordinary, but because she understood the value of speaking up. Every voice mattered, especially when it came to challenging prejudice and fostering understanding. By sharing her experience, she hoped to encourage others to do the same, to find strength in vulnerability and courage in community. As she finally stood up and grabbed her suitcase from the carousel, Sarah felt lighter, as though she had shed some invisible weight. The journey ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges she couldn't predict, but she walked forward with renewed purpose. She carried with her not just her belongings, but also the knowledge that she wasn't alone, and that sometimes even the smallest acts of kindness could leave the biggest impact. And so, as Sarah disappeared into the crowd, blending seamlessly into the sea of travelers, her story continued to spread. Online, it sparked discussions about privilege, respect, and accountability. Offline, it inspired quiet reflections among those who heard it, a reminder that every interaction, no matter how fleeting, held the potential to shape someone's day or even their life for better or worse. The days following Sarah's flight passed quickly, but the impact of her story lingered, not just for her but for everyone who had been touched by it. Her social media post about the incident continued to gain traction, spreading far beyond her circle of friends and acquaintances. Within 48 hours, it had been shared thousands of times, sparking conversations across platforms and even catching the attention of local news outlets. What started as a personal reflection became a catalyst for broader discussions about respect, fairness, and standing up against prejudice. For Sarah, this unexpected wave of attention was both overwhelming and humbling. Messages poured in from people around the world, some sharing their own experiences of discrimination, others expressing gratitude for her courage in speaking out. A young woman named Priya wrote, "I've been in situations like yours before, but I never thought to share my story because I didn't think anyone would care. Reading your post made me realize that our voices matter. Thank you." Another commenter, an older man named James, simply said, "You reminded me why treating people with dignity isn't negotiable. We all need more Lisas in this world." Sarah, read each message carefully, taking time to respond whenever she could. She knew how isolating it felt to face bias or unfair treatment, especially when no one acknowledged it. If her story could provide comfort or validation to even one person, she felt it was worth sharing. Still, the sheer volume of responses left her reflecting deeply on the ripple effects of small actions. One act of standing up, or one moment of support, could inspire change in ways she hadn't anticipated. Meanwhile, Lisa, the flight attendant, whose intervention had silenced Mark, remained largely unaware of the viral attention surrounding her role in the incident. For her, that day had been just another shift, a chance to do her job well and ensure passengers felt safe and respected. But word eventually reached her through colleagues who had seen Sarah's post online. By the time Lisa logged onto her own social media account, which she rarely used, she found herself flooded with praise from strangers calling her a hero. At first, Lisa was taken aback. She didn't see herself as extraordinary. She was simply doing what she believed was right. "I'm not special," she told a coworker during a break at work. "Anyone else in my position should have done the same thing." Yet, deep down, she couldn't deny the significance of what had happened. In a world where biases often went unchecked, moments like these mattered. They reminded people that accountability existed, and that standing up for someone didn't require grand gestures, just a commitment to fairness. Encouraged by her colleagues, Lisa decided to embrace the spotlight briefly, using it as an opportunity to reinforce the values she stood for. She recorded a short video thanking those who had supported her and emphasizing the importance of treating everyone equally, regardless of race, gender, or background. "We're all human beings deserving of respect," she said earnestly into the camera. "If my actions inspired even one person to think differently or act with kindness, then I'm grateful for that." Her video resonated widely, earning millions of views and further amplifying Sarah's original message. Together, their stories created a powerful narrative, one of resilience, allyship, and the transformative power of standing firm against injustice. News outlets picked up on the story, interviewing both Sarah and Lisa separately. During her interview, Sarah spoke candidly about the emotional toll of facing prejudice, but also about the hope she found in seeing so many people rally behind her. "It's easy to feel powerless when you're singled out," she admitted. "But knowing that there are allies like Lisa and countless others willing to speak up makes me believe we can create a better world." Lisa, too, appeared in interviews, always deflecting praise back onto the idea of collective responsibility. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," she insisted repeatedly. "This is about all of us recognizing our roles in creating environments where everyone feels valued. Whether you're a flight attendant, a teacher, or just someone waiting in line at the store, we all have opportunities to make a difference." Back in his corner of the world, Mark wrestled with his own thoughts about the incident. Though he hadn't seen Sarah's viral post, whispers of the story reached him indirectly through mutual acquaintances. At first, he dismissed them, convinced that people were exaggerating or misunderstanding what had happened. But as snippets of the narrative trickled into his life, comments from co-workers, disapproving looks from neighbors, he began to feel the weight of his actions. Mark wasn't accustomed to being portrayed as the antagonist. He prided himself on being a good father, a hardworking professional, and a decent human being. Yet the more he reflected on the flight, the harder it became to ignore the truth. His behavior had been wrong. The memory of Lisa's calm yet pointed words haunted him, the reminder that every passenger deserved equal treatment, regardless of circumstances. And while he initially tried to justify his actions by telling himself he was only looking out for his family, he eventually realized that excuse didn't hold water. One evening, sitting alone in his living room after his wife and kids had gone to bed, Mark opened his laptop and searched for Sarah's post. As he read through her account of the incident, his chest tightened. Her words painted a picture he hadn't fully considered, that his demands hadn't just inconvenienced her. They had undermined her sense of belonging and dignity. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine how she must have felt in that moment, cornered, judged, and diminished. Feeling a mix of guilt and shame, Mark debated reaching out to apologize. Part of him worried it might come across as insincere or self-serving, given the public nature of the story. But another part of him knew it was the right thing to do. After drafting and redrafting a message several times, he finally sent an email to Sarah, writing, "Dear Sarah, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to acknowledge that my behavior on the flight was unacceptable. I let frustration get the better of me and failed to treat you with the respect you deserve. Please know that I am truly sorry for any pain or discomfort I caused." Sincerely, Mark. Sending the email felt like stepping off a ledge, leaving him vulnerable in a way he wasn't used to. Days passed without a response, and Mark wondered if Sarah had even received his note, or if she'd chosen not to reply. But then, late one night, he saw a notification pop up on his phone. It was a reply from Sarah. "Hi Mark, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate your apology, and I believe you when you say you're sorry. I hope this experience has given you a chance to reflect, just as it has for me. Moving forward, I trust you'll approach similar situations with more understanding and empathy. Take care." Sarah reading her response. Mark felt a wave of relief mixed with resolve. He knew apologizing wouldn't undo what had happened, but it was a step toward growth. A reminder that accountability required action, not just words. As the weeks turned into months, the aftermath of the flight continued to shape lives in subtle, yet profound ways. Sarah carried the experience with her, drawing strength from the knowledge that her voice had sparked meaningful conversations. Lisa returned to her daily routines, buoyed by the reminder that even small acts of courage could leave lasting impressions. And Mark, though quieter about his journey, committed himself to learning and growing, determined to be better, not just for his family, but for the world around him. In the end, the story wasn't just about one confrontation on a plane. It was about connection, accountability, and the belief that change begins with the choices we make every day. Choices to listen, to stand up, and to treat others with the humanity they deserve. The months that followed the flight brought changes, some visible, others subtle, to the lives of those involved. For Sarah, the experience became a turning point, not just in how she saw herself, but also in how she engaged with the world around her. She had always been aware of the biases and prejudices that existed, but this incident forced her to confront them head-on. Instead of shying away from difficult conversations, she began seeking them out. Whether it was speaking at community events, participating in diversity workshops, or simply sharing her thoughts with friends and colleagues, Sarah embraced her role as someone who could inspire others to think differently. Her newfound confidence wasn't about becoming an activist overnight. It was about recognizing the power of storytelling. Every time she recounted what happened on the plane, she reminded people that discrimination wasn't something abstract. It happened in everyday moments, often cloaked in seemingly harmless actions or words. By shining a light on these experiences, she hoped to encourage empathy and understanding. Change doesn't happen all at once, she often said during talks. It starts with listening, learning, and being willing to have uncomfortable conversations. For Lisa, the aftermath of the viral attention was both rewarding and humbling. While she appreciated the praise and recognition, she remained grounded in her purpose, ensuring every passenger felt safe, respected, and valued. Her commitment to fairness extended beyond flights, influencing how she interacted with people, in her personal life as well. Friends and family noticed a shift in her demeanor, not because she had changed fundamentally, but because she carried herself with even greater conviction. When asked about her newfound celebrity status, Lisa would laugh and say, "I'm still just a flight attendant doing my job. The real heroes are the ones who speak up when they see injustice." Her humility resonated deeply with coworkers, many of whom looked to her as a role model. Inspired by her example, several flight attendants began sharing their own stories of standing up against bias or supporting passengers in need. One colleague, Maria, confided in Lisa about a recent incident where she had intervened when a passenger made derogatory remarks toward a fellow traveler. "I thought about what you did," Maria admitted, "and I realized I couldn't stay silent. It felt good to stand up for someone, even if it was scary." Lisa smiled, feeling proud of her friend. "That's what it's all about," she replied. "We're stronger together when we look out for each other." As for Mark, his journey of reflection led him down a path of growth and accountability. After receiving Sarah's response to his apology, he felt a renewed sense of responsibility, not just to make amends, but to ensure he didn't repeat his mistakes. He started educating himself on issues of race, privilege, and unconscious bias, reading books and attending online seminars. Though he initially worried about appearing performative, he soon realized that learning was a lifelong process. "I'll never fully understand what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes," he told his wife one evening, "but I can try to be more mindful of my actions and their impact." Mark's efforts weren't limited to self-education. He began having open conversations with his children about kindness, respect, and treating others fairly. During a family dinner, his son asked why they were talking so much about these topics lately. Mark paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because sometimes Dad makes mistakes," he explained. "And when I do, it's important to learn from them so I can be better. For you, for Mom, and for everyone we meet." His honesty struck a chord with his kids, who seemed genuinely interested in understanding the lessons he was trying to impart. Watching them ask thoughtful questions and engage in discussions filled Mark with hope. He knew he couldn't erase the past, but he could shape the future, one conversation at a time. Meanwhile, the broader impact of Sarah's story continued to ripple outward. News outlets revisited the incident, framing it as a powerful reminder of the importance of allyship and standing up against prejudice. Social media users kept the conversation alive, sharing updates about Sarah and Lisa's advocacy work while celebrating small victories in their own communities. A hashtag inspired by the story, Stand for Respect, began trending, encouraging people to share acts of kindness and solidarity they witnessed or experienced. One particularly heartwarming example came from a young flight attendant named Chloe, who posted a video thanking Lisa for inspiring her. In the clip, Chloe recounted how she had recently confronted a passenger who mocked another traveler for wearing traditional attire. "I remembered your words," Chloe wrote in the caption. "Every passenger deserves respect. So I stepped in, and it made all the difference." Stories like Chloe's reminded Sarah and Lisa of the profound effect their actions had on others. They didn't set out to be role models, but their courage had sparked a chain reaction, empowering countless individuals to take a stand in their own lives. Eventually, Sarah decided to write a book based on her experiences. Titled, Above the Woe, Clouds, Stories of Courage and Connection. The memoir explored not only the flight incident but also other moments in her life where she faced adversity and found strength in unexpected places. Writing the book allowed her to process everything she'd been through while offering readers practical advice on navigating similar challenges. Upon its release, the memoir quickly climbed bestseller lists, earning glowing reviews from critics and fans alike. At a book signing event months later, Sarah spotted Lisa in the crowd. Smiling warmly, she invited her onto the stage. "This woman is the reason I'm here today," Sarah told the audience, gesturing to Lisa. She reminded me that even in the toughest moments, there are allies ready to stand beside us. And she showed me that courage isn't about grand gestures. It's about doing the right thing no matter how small it seems. Lisa blushed, clearly uncomfortable with the spotlight, but grateful for the moment. As she stood next to Sarah, she addressed the crowd briefly, reiterating the message she had shared countless times before. We all have the power to create change. Whether you're on a plane, in a classroom, or simply walking down the street, remember that your actions matter. Treat everyone with kindness and respect, and don't be afraid to speak up when you see injustice. The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing the sentiment that had united so many people through this story. In that moment, it was clear that Sarah and Lisa's journey had transcended individual experiences, becoming a symbol of hope and resilience for anyone striving to build a more inclusive and compassionate world. As the event drew to a close, Sarah and Lisa hugged tightly, silently acknowledging the bond they had formed despite never planning to cross paths. Their story, a tale of confrontation, accountability, and growth, had touched lives far beyond what either of them could have imagined. It served as a testament to the idea that even the smallest acts of courage could leave an indelible mark, reminding us all that we are capable of making a difference one decision at a time.